So I received a message from Brandon the other day on my IG account. And if you're not following me on IG, definitely check me out at Jamel Gibbs. But listen, Brandon asked me when he's talking to sellers, should he use a script? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna throw you an alley-oop and I'm gonna share with you my script that I use in my business coming up. All right, y'all, so today what we're gonna do is talk about using a script in your real estate investing business when you're talking to motivated sellers. So in my opinion, even if you're a pro in this business, I've been doing this for 20 years, even if you're a pro, you definitely want to be using a script or at least have your questions written out. Now, granted, most of the time, I have to be honest, I'm guilty of it as well. I don't use a script, but occasionally I find myself referring back to a script whenever I have to talk to a motivated seller. And that's primarily because I don't spend a lot of time on the phone with sellers these days. I have virtual assistants and other team players in place to be able to handle that stuff for me. So I focus on what I'm actually great at, which is negotiating. But when I do talk to motivated sellers, I definitely want to have this property information sheet near me. And that way I make sure I'm getting all of the information that I need in order to make a solid offer on a property, in order to qualify a property the right way. So what I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna go through this very sheet, line by line with you. And I'm gonna share with you how you should structure your conversation when you're talking to a motivated seller. Now, before I do that, I want you to go ahead and hit that like button right now and subscribe to my channel, click the notification bell as well. I'm gonna wait. All right, so when it comes to the property information sheet, you can see there's 3 sections that we wanna focus on. All right, the first section is the contact information. The second section is the property description. And the third section is the mortgage information. Now, under each section, there's questions that you want to ask the seller. You need to get this information in order to be able to qualify a motivated seller. One thing before we jump in, I want you to keep in mind is you want to make sure that you get each of these questions, each of these sections filled out. If you cannot get majority of these questions filled out, then you do not have a motivated seller on your hands. All right. If a seller is willing to provide you with this information, or at least majority of the information, because granted, some of it they may not know, then you will not have a motivated seller. So that's how we dictate who a motivated seller is. We dictate this by finding out how much information they're willing to give us, and then we analyze the details in order to be able to make them a solid offer. So for example, under the contact information, we have the owner's name, we have the best contact phone number, and then we have how did you hear about us. Now, the owner's name is obvious, right? The best contact information is obvious. But why did we ask, how did you hear about us? It's because we want to know where we're putting our marketing dollars and where these leads are actually coming from so that we could spend more marketing dollars to get more leads just like it. Let me repeat that. All we're doing is asking this question so we know where the leads are actually coming from, so we know where to put our marketing attention when it comes to driving leads in our business, right? So you definitely want to get the contact information and you want to know where the seller got your information from, so you know where to put your marketing efforts. All right. Under the second section here, we have property description. The first thing we want to get is the property address. Even if you have the property address, it's important to make sure that you ask the seller what the location of the property is. All right. And this is a buildup in the conversation to establish a rapport for you. So you're going to ask some basic information, even if you have the information. Now, granted, some people may say, well, you contacted us, you should have the property address. That seller may not be as motivated as you want them to be right off the bat, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not ready to sell. The next thing you want to find out, is there a homeowners association? What are the monthly fees? How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms are there? What's the square footage? What's the lot size? The square footage and the lot size, most sellers probably won't know that information. They'll have a roundabout idea of what the size of the house is, but some of them won't even know what the lot size is. You have other sellers who, they're proud of the size of their lots. Maybe they have 2 or 3 acres of land and they're proud of it, so they know that number. But all in all, you still want to find out what the lot size and the square footage is. And, you know, to be honest, this is just for conversational purposes. You don't necessarily need to stress finding out that information, because this is information that you could get on sites like Zillow anyway. All right. Is there a garage? Is there a basement? These are things that you need to know. Basic conversational information to establish rapport with the seller. All right. Now, another thing I want to bring up, you want to keep these questions in a conversational format. You don't want to make it seem like you're giving them a questionnaire. All right. You want to make it seem like it's a conversation. What you're trying to do is establish a rapport. You want to be likable in the conversation. You want to make sure that the seller is relating to you in a way that will allow you to be able to get the information that you need in order to make them the offer that you want to make. All right, so that's probably the best way to put it. Establish a rapport with the seller through a conversation, not a questionnaire. All right, so the next thing you want to find out, what's the style of the home? Is it single family, multi-unit? Is it condo? Is it land? Then you want to find out the construction, the build of the property. Is it a brick, a frame, a stucco? Is it a block type of home? You know, what type of property is it? Now, the following questions are going to be your meat. All right. These are going to be important questions that you need to ask the seller in the way that I'm going to explain it to you, in order to really get the seller to negotiate with themselves. You're not going to negotiate with the seller. The seller is going to drop the price on their own. Let me explain. The first thing you want to find out is the asking price. And by the way, before I even jump into that, on the sheet, there's going to be words that are going to be in bold. Those are going to be your most important questions that you want to ask. If it's in bold, you need to ask these questions. All right, so keep that in mind. So the first thing you want to find out is the asking price. So Mr. Seller, this is a nice house. You know, I'm curious, how much are you asking for this house right now? Once you find out that information, no matter what they say, the very next thing you need to ask them is, okay, I definitely understand. I appreciate you providing me with that asking price. Let me ask you this. If I were to come to you with a bag of cash, how much needs to be in that bag in order for us to be able to close this deal today? What's the least amount you'll take for a cash offer on your house? Now, chances are, if they're truly motivated to sell, let's say the seller came to you with an initial asking price of $100,000. If they're truly motivated to sell, most of them will drop the price. As soon as you ask, what's the least you'll take for a cash offer? Maybe they'll drop $5,000. Maybe they'll drop $10,000. But most of them, if they're truly motivated, they're going to drop the price. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that if they don't drop the price, they're not motivated. But if they do, then you have a hot one on your hands. Now, listen to this. You have the asking price. You have the least amount that they'll take for a cash offer. The very next question needs to be, is that the best you can do? And now you have to pay attention to how you say that as well. All right, so for example, what's your asking price? What's the least amount you'll take for a cash offer, Mr. Seller? Is that the best you can do? Notice how I said that. Is that the best you can do? Almost like you're puzzled that they didn't drop the price even more. How you ask the question is super important to getting the seller to think about dropping the price a little more. It's called NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. How you say things and how you ask things will affect the way people think about what you're saying. All right? So again, you find out what the asking price is. Okay, I understand that's your asking price, Mr. Seller. What's the least you'll take for a cash offer if we were to pay you cash on this property? Is that the best you can do? And then, no matter what they say, you say, okay, I appreciate that, that information. What do you think the house would appraise for? Now, the reason why you want to ask that question to the seller is primarily to find out what they think their house is worth. So you might look at some comps, and let's just say a house is worth $125,000 or $200,000. The seller might think the house can only appraise for 80 grand. That's automatic equity. All right. It's not your job to educate the seller on what their house value is. and you're not looking to rip people off either. But it's your job to give them a fair offer based off of the information that they provide for you. All right, so again, what do you think the house would appraise for? How did you come up with your asking price? The reason why you want to ask that question is primarily because you have sellers that will base their price off of what a house across the street is actually selling for, is up for sale for, not what it's sold for, what it's selling for. So for example, I could have a house across the street. I could be proud of my home, right? I could say, okay, this house across the street, they have their house listed for $500,000 or $600,000. My house is better than that. So I want to ask $700,000. So you have some sellers that will base their price off of what they think their house is worth, because most sellers think they have the Taj Mahal unless they are truly motivated to sell. So just to give you an idea, again, this is for conversational purposes. What do you think the house would appraise for? How did you come up with that asking price, Mr. Seller? Now, here's the key. You have the asking price, and by this time, you've probably gotten a lower number out of what their actual price is to what they would actually take on the property. So the next thing you want to find out is the property condition. Now, in previous years, I used to ask the seller straight out, how much work do you think the property needs? Give me a dollar amount, throw me in the ballpark. But after trial and testing and things like that, I found a much easier way to calculate my repairs. And this helps me when I'm doing virtual wholesaling. This helps me when I'm doing virtual investing in general. I actually created a video on this method, and I'll link that video up at the top so that you can check it out in order to estimate the repairs virtually, right? Now, this works locally as well. Now, how does this work? Rather than asking the seller how much work the property needs, all you're gonna do is have the seller rate a property from a 1 to a 5. 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. I found this to be probably the easiest method that I've ever come up with in order to really be able to dictate how much work a property actually needs. Mr. Seller, now I understand you're asking this, and we're obviously interested in this property. Let me ask you a question, because I really want to get an idea of how much work the property needs so I can make you the fairest offer that I possibly can. Let me ask you a question. If you had to rate the property from a 1 to a 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, okay? Now keep that in mind, Mr. Seller. 1 is the property needs to be torn down. 5 means it's in the best condition it can be. What would you rate the property at? Well, I think the property can fall at a 3. I really appreciate that, Mr. Seller. Now, no matter what they tell you, from 1 to a 5, what you're gonna do is take that number, and I'm not gonna explain it in full detail because I'm gonna link the video up at the top as I've mentioned, but all you're gonna do is take that number and multiply it by the square footage of the property based off of a 10, 15, or $20+ square foot approach on the property. It's pretty accurate. It throws me in a ballpark to how much work a property actually needs. And at the end of the day, I always come up with the right offer. It hasn't failed me yet. So definitely use that method, all right? Now, you wanna find out if the property is vacant or occupied. You also wanna find out the reason why. I know you've heard this before. Why are you selling, Mr. Seller? But that's a really, really important question. Why are you looking to sell, all right? Getting a divorce, or I just got a job transfer. You want to make the seller go into as much detail as possible on why they're selling. And that way, just remember, you're in a problem-solving business. You want to find out what the problem is. So why are they selling? Why are they truly looking to sell? All right? That's going to ultimately tell you what the real problem is. And remember, as I've mentioned, you're in a problem-solving business. So you want to be able to take that information and be able to solve that problem. That's how you're going to reach the seller's heart, okay? You have to be able to solve the seller's most important problem that they're facing right now. If you can do that and you can create a solution that can be a win-win for both of you, then you have yourself a deal. All right. And how soon do you need to sell? That's going to be a clear indicator of how motivated they are as well. How do I know? Well, if a seller tells me, well, call me back in 6 months, we can talk, then the seller is not motivated. If the seller tells me I'm ready to sell right now or like yesterday, then we have a motivated seller. Common sense, right? All right, so the next section you want to focus on is the mortgage information. Now, some properties don't have mortgages. If they don't, then you skip these mortgage questions. If they do have a mortgage and you can come up with some type of creative way of doing a deal, you need to find out the mortgage information. All right, but the last two questions are probably some of the most important questions outside of the asking price and what's the least they'll take for a cash offer. Will you sell for what you owe on it? That's going to tell you if they're truly motivated or not. And if they, let's say they owe $48,000 and the house needs 30 grand in repairs and is only worth 125, and they're willing to just get rid of the property, then guess what? You have yourself a deal. You know, I've had people give me properties for free just because they wanted to get out of their mortgage or just because they wanted to get out of the deal in general. So be mindful of that. Always ask that question, will you sell for what you owe on it? Do not ask that question if there's a mortgage, if there's no mortgage on the property, because that can be an insult to the seller. Finally, this is the key question. This is going to allow you to do multiple types of deals. Would you consider a lease purchase or owner financing if that was an option that we were willing to present to you? So not only can we pay cash, Mr. Seller, but now you're telling them there's other options out there for them as well. All right, and I have videos up on YouTube showing you how to put together deals like that as well. All right, so that's your questionnaire. That's your property information sheet that you want to go through. You have the contact information at the top, the property description, and then you have the mortgage information and those key questions at the bottom that will allow you to be able to determine what type of deal you can then put together for the motivated seller. Now listen, I want to provide you with a copy of this. All you got to do is search in the description box below this video, and I'll give you a copy of this for free. And in addition to that, you know, a lot of you guys are interested in wholesaling real estate. I get it. It's the easiest way to get started in real estate investing, but you also want to look at other avenues of investing. I've been talking about creative real estate investing forever. I want you to start looking at some creative options as well. Now, I have a playlist on wholesaling on my YouTube channel that I want you to check out. And to be quite frank, if you go through these videos and you do not get a deal, then you're just not working hard enough or you're not trying hard enough. Because, and I'm just being honest, my wholesale playlist is information that people would actually pay for, and it's given to you for free on YouTube. I have all types of contracts and documents and forms, just like the property information sheet I went through today. You have everything that you need to actually get out there and do a deal. It's entirely up to you to go ahead and do it. All right, so listen, like this video, subscribe to my channel, share this video, leave a comment below, do all of that good stuff, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Peace.